How many stands on your property have you written off as dead because you sat them 5 or 6 times and never saw a deer worth shooting? Because I had 3 stands like that across 2 properties, and I was ready to pull all 3 of them until a buddy asked me a question I had never considered. He said, "What does the dirt smell like under those stands?" I said, "Dirt." He said, "That is the problem." I did not understand what he meant at first. Dirt is dirt. It smells like the ground. Every stand sits on dirt. I had been thinking about stand location for 15 years and never once thought about what the soil under the stand smelled like to a deer. A deer's nose processes ground scent constantly while it walks. Every step pushes volatile compounds out of the soil and into the air at hoof level. A deer walking over mineral-rich soil at the right pH gets a steady stream of calcium, sodium, and trace element signals with every footfall. A deer walking over acidic soil with locked-up minerals gets nothing. The same trail through the same timber on the same day can smell completely different to a deer, depending on the soil chemistry underneath it. A stand in a good location with dead dirt underneath it is a hallway with no doors. The deer walk through, but they do not stop. A stand in the same location with soil that smells like minerals, fermentation, and sodium is a hallway with an open kitchen. The deer walk through, smell the soil, and pause. That pause is your shot window. The mixture that reactivates dead dirt under a stand costs roughly $2 per application and contains 3 ingredients you already have in your house: blackstrap molasses, baking soda, and plain salt. Before I explain why this combination works differently than every other attractant recipe on the internet, I need to mention that placing attractants on the ground is classified as baiting in roughly 20 states. Legal in some, restricted in others, banned entirely in a few. Check your state regulations before using this or any attractant mixture. If you have reactivated a dead stand using a soil treatment, I want to hear how long it took to start pulling deer. Stay until the end, because the baking soda in this mixture does something underground that no commercial attractant on the market replicates. And it is the reason the mixture keeps working for 4 to 6 weeks without a single refresh, while every commercial product fades in 5 to 7 days. The problem with dead stands is almost never the location. I learned this on my West Central Illinois property, that flat agricultural and hardwood timber transition country between Macomb and Quincy, where the corn and soybean fields run up against timbered creek drainages, and the deer travel the edges between them. I had a lone wolf hang-on at $280, positioned on a white oak at the intersection of 2 trails along a drainage ditch. The trails were worn, the rubs were fresh. The sign said everything I wanted to hear. 6 sits in October and early November, produced 4 daws at distance, and 0 bucks inside 40 yards. The stand was not in a bad location. The deer were using the trails. They were just not stopping. They walked through the intersection at 3 to 4 miles per hour without pausing, browsing, or investigating anything on the ground. They treated my stand location like a sidewalk, not a destination. I sat there one evening watching a doe and 2 fawns walk past at 35 yards without even turning their heads. They were moving at the same pace they would use crossing a parking lot. No browsing, no nose to the ground, no interest in the area around my stand whatsoever. The trails were active, the deer were present. But nothing in that 50-yard radius was giving them a reason to slow down. My wife asked me why I kept hunting a stand where nothing happens. I told her the deer are there, they just will not stop. She said maybe you should give them a reason to stop. She was right. She usually is. The buddy who asked about the dirt is a land manager who runs food plot programs on hunting leases across western Illinois and the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, that mountain agricultural and hardwood country between Harrisonburg and Staunton, where the valley floor is limestone and the ridges are acidic shale. He told me that most timber stands sit on acidic soil, typically pH 4.5 to 5.5, because decades of oak leaf decomposition and pine needle drop have acidified the topsoil layer. At that pH, the calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, and trace minerals in the soil are chemically locked up. They exist in the dirt, but they are not bioavailable, meaning the deer cannot smell them and the plants growing in that soil cannot absorb them efficiently. The soil smells like dirt because the minerals are bound to aluminum and iron compounds that do not volatilize at acidic pH. The deer walk over mineral-rich soil every day without detecting it because the chemistry is locked. Raise the pH to 6.2 to 6.5, and those minerals become bioavailable. Calcium phosphate dissolves. Magnesium ions release from their aluminum bonds. Trace elements like zinc and copper become soluble in the soil moisture layer. The soil starts smelling like a mineral lick because, chemically, it has become one. The minerals were always there. The pH was wrong. This part took me a while to accept because it contradicts the common understanding that you need to add minerals to the soil to create a mineral lick. You do not. On most timbered properties, the soil already contains calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, and trace elements in adequate concentrations. The problem is not mineral deficiency. The problem is mineral availability. At pH 4.5, roughly 80% of the calcium in the soil is locked in chemical bonds with aluminum that deer cannot detect or access. At pH 6.5, that same calcium is dissolved in the soil moisture layer and producing volatile calcium carbonate compounds that a deer can smell from 30 yards. You did not add a mineral. You freed the ones that were already there. Penn State's College of Agricultural Sciences has published extensive soil chemistry data showing this pH availability relationship for every major nutrient. Their recommendation for agricultural liming is based on exactly this principle: raise the pH to release the minerals. What I am describing is the same chemistry applied to a 2-foot circle of dirt under a tree stand instead of a 200-acre farm field. Quick pause here. Everything I just walked through, and 100 more tricks like it, is sitting inside the Buck Hunter's Bible, 2026 edition. 280 pages of the stuff that actually puts deer on the ground. And right now, if you grab it, I am throwing in the 30-day opening day roadmap completely free. That is a 60-page day-by-day preseason plan that walks you from the first scout to opening morning. So you start this season ahead of every other hunter in the woods. Link in the description, QR code on screen. This is the season you stop guessing. That is where the baking soda comes in. Baking soda is sodium bicarbonate, chemical formula NaHCO3. When you dissolve sodium bicarbonate in water and pour it on acidic soil, it reacts with the hydrogen ions in the soil to produce carbon dioxide, water, and sodium ions. The reaction raises the pH of the treated soil from roughly 4.5 to 5.5 up to 6 to 6.5 within the top 2 to 3 inches of the soil profile, roughly the depth of your index finger to the first knuckle. That 2 to 3 inch layer is the scent active zone, the layer that deer noses interact with when they lower their heads to investigate the ground. The pH shift is localized. It affects a circle of soil roughly 18 to 24 inches across, about the size of a truck tire, which is exactly the area a deer investigates when it stops to check a ground scent. The carbon dioxide, produced by the acid-base reaction, creates a fizzing action that agitates the liquid and disperses the volatile compounds in the molasses across the surface faster than a static pour. The fizz is brief, lasting roughly 2 to 3 minutes after application, but the dispersal effect means the scent footprint of the application covers a wider area in the first hour than a non-fizzing pour. The molasses serves 2 functions. First, it is the caloric signal. Blackstrap molasses contains roughly 60% sugar by weight, primarily sucrose, with concentrations of iron, calcium, magnesium, and potassium that are roughly 5 times higher than regular molasses because the refining process concentrates the minerals into the final extraction. The volatile compounds in blackstrap, specifically melanoidins and furfuryl, produce a heavy sweet aroma that carries on thermals. Second, and this is the part most attractant videos skip, the sugars in the molasses feed soil bacteria at the application site. Within 48 to 72 hours of application, the native bacteria in the soil begin fermenting the sugars into ethanol, acetic acid, and lactic acid. That fermentation produces a secondary scent profile that changes the smell of the site from sweet molasses to sour-sweet fermented fruit. The fermentation scent is what extends the effective life of the application from 5 days to 4 to 6 weeks, because the bacteria continue producing volatile compounds long after the original molasses scent has faded. The commercial products cannot replicate this because they add preservatives, specifically sodium benzoate and potassium sorbate, that kill the very bacteria responsible for the extended fermentation. The preservatives keep the product stable on a shelf for 18 months, but they sterilize the soil bacteria at the application site and shut down the secondary fermentation within days. I confirmed this accidentally when I poured leftover Evolved Habitat's deer cane liquid on a patch of dirt next to my homemade patch as a comparison test on the Illinois property. The commercial patch had heavy deer traffic for 5 days. By day 8, the visits dropped to near zero. The commercial product had killed the native soil bacteria with its preservatives, and the fermentation cycle never started. My homemade patch, 15 yards away, was still actively fermenting at day 8, and the deer visits were increasing, not decreasing, because the fermentation scent was getting stronger as the bacteria consumed more sugar. Same corridor, same deer, one patch dying after a week, the other one gaining momentum. The $22 product stopped itself. The $2 product fed itself. You are paying $18 to $22 per bag for a product that is chemically designed to stop working quickly, so you buy more. I am not saying the companies are doing this on purpose. Shelf stability is a legitimate engineering requirement for a commercial product, but the side effect is that the thing that makes a commercial attractant shippable is the same thing that makes it short-lived. The salt in the mixture is the third signal. Plain table salt or trace mineral salt from the feed store at $5 for a 50-pound bag, which is enough for roughly 200 applications. The sodium ions from both the salt and the baking soda create a mineral draw that deer detect from downwind, at distances researchers at Mississippi State University's Deer Lab documented at 50 to 80 yards in moderate humidity, roughly the distance from home plate to the outfield wall. The sodium draw is what brings the deer to the site initially. I want to explain why sodium matters more than most hunters realize, because it connects to the timing of your application. Whitetails lose sodium through sweat and urine year-round, but the demand spikes in spring and summer during antler growth and lactation. By early fall, when most of us start applying attractants, the deer have been sodium depleted for 5 months. A study from the University of New Hampshire's Thompson School documented that whitetails in the northeastern United States show measurable increases in sodium-seeking behavior starting in late August, peaking in October, and declining through December as metabolic demands decrease in cold weather. The October peak in sodium-seeking behavior coincides exactly with the window when most hunters are setting up stands and deploying attractants. The timing is not a coincidence. The deer are biologically primed to investigate sodium sources in October more aggressively than at any other time of the year. If you apply the mixture in August and let the fermentation and pH modification develop over 4 to 6 weeks, the site reaches peak scent output in early October, when the deer are most motivated to find it. The molasses fermentation is what makes them stay and dig. The pH-modified soil is what keeps them coming back for weeks, because the bioavailable minerals in the treated soil replenish with every rain event as water percolates through the now neutral pH zone and dissolves additional mineral compounds from the subsurface. The recipe is simple: 1 cup of blackstrap molasses at roughly $4 for a 1-2-ounce bottle, 2 tablespoons of baking soda at roughly 50 cents worth from a standard box, a 1/4 cup of salt, either table salt or trace mineral salt. Mix all 3 into a quart of warm water. Stir until the baking soda fizzes and the molasses dissolves. The mixture will foam slightly. That is the carbon dioxide from the acid-base reaction. Pour the entire quart onto a bare patch of soil 18 to 24 inches across, within 15 to 25 yards of your stand, roughly the distance across a large living room to the distance across a tennis court. Look, I am going to be straight with you. Everything I am walking through in this video is just a small piece of what is inside the Buck Hunter's Bible, 2026 edition, 280 pages, 101 field-tested tricks. And right now, you also get the 30-day opening day roadmap free with it, a 60-page day-by-day plan that gets you ready before the season even starts. I do not know how long that bonus stays in the deal, but if you have been watching these videos and thinking this could be my season, that is the move. Link in the description below, QR code on screen. Make this the year. I applied this mixture under my dead Illinois stand in late September. No other changes. Same stand, same tree, same access route. same wind days. The first camera check 2 weeks later showed 11 deer visits to the treated soil patch, compared to 0 stops at the intersection during my previous 6 sits. By week 4, the patch had been excavated by deer hooves to a depth of roughly 3 inches, about the depth of a coffee mug, as deer pawed through the treated soil to reach the mineral-rich layer underneath. The fermentation smell was still detectable at 10 yards when I checked the site at week 5. I did not refresh. The bacteria were still working. My first sit on the reactivated stand produced a 3-year-old 8 point at 22 yards at 5:15 p.m. He walked the same trail he had always used, but instead of passing through the intersection without stopping, he turned his head, caught the mineral scent from the treated soil, and walked 8 yards off the trail to investigate the patch. He stood there for roughly 45 seconds with his nose on the ground. 45 seconds does not sound like much, until you have spent 6 sits watching deer walk past you at full speed without a glance. The difference between a deer that walks past at 3 miles per hour and a deer that stops for 45 seconds is the difference between no shot opportunity and a comfortable, well-aimed shot with time to pick your spot. I drew my Hoyt VTM 34 at full draw for 12 seconds before releasing. That is a luxury I had never had at that stand. Every previous opportunity, if you could call it that, was a deer moving through at a pace that gave me roughly 2 to 3 seconds in my shooting lane. Not enough time to draw, aim, and execute a clean release. The treated soil gave me the pause. The pause gave me the shot. That 45 seconds was more time than any deer had spent within bow range of that stand in 6 previous sits combined. I made the shot at 22 yards quartering away, which means the deer was angled with his hind quarter toward me and his head pointing away, giving me a clear path to the vitals behind the front shoulder. A buddy who runs a lease on the coastal plain of North Carolina, that flat pine flatwoods and Pocosin swamp country east of Jacksonville, where the soil is sandy and acidic from centuries of longleaf pine needle accumulation, tested the same mixture on 3 dead stands that had not produced a mature buck sighting in 2 seasons. His soil tested at pH 4.8, which is strongly acidic. After 2 applications of the baking soda mixture spaced 3 weeks apart, his soil at the treated patches measured pH 6.1. His camera data showed a combined increase from 4 deer visits across all 3 stands in October to 19 visits in November after the second application. His words, not mine, and 2 properties in 2 states are not proof of anything universal, but the pattern matches what the soil chemistry predicts. Where this does not work is on limestone-based soils that already have a neutral to alkaline pH above 6.5. The Shenandoah Valley floor, for example, sits on limestone bedrock that produces soil pH in the 6.5 to 7.5 range naturally. Adding baking soda to soil that is already neutral accomplishes nothing because the minerals are already bioavailable. On those properties, skip the baking soda entirely and use only the molasses and salt as a caloric and sodium draw. The pH modification is only effective on acidic soil, which covers the majority of timbered hunting properties east of the Mississippi, but not the limestone valleys and agricultural bottomlands, where the soil has been limed by farmers for decades. The cost comparison over a season puts this in perspective. 4 applications of the homemade mixture across the season costs roughly $8 in total ingredients. 4 applications of Wild Game Innovations Sugar Beet Crush at $18 per bag costs $72. Evolved Habitats Deer Cane Black Magic at $22 per bag costs $88. Buck Bomb Doe and Estrus at $10 per can costs $40, but addresses a completely different biological signal and has 0 soil chemistry benefit. Over 5 seasons, the homemade mixture costs roughly $40 total. The commercial equivalents cost $200 to $440. My Vortex Diamondback binoculars cost $230. I did the math last winter sitting at my kitchen table, with every receipt from the last 10 years of scent and attractant purchases spread across the counter. My wife walked in, looked at the receipts, and said how much. I said roughly $2,400 on commercial scent products over a decade. She did not say anything for about 5 seconds. Then she said that is a European trip. She was not wrong. 10 years of commercial attractants at an average of $240 per year adds up to a number that makes you question every purchase you ever made in a pro shop. The savings from 5 years of homemade soil treatment covers a new set of glass. The deer at the patch do not know whether you spent $2 or $22. They know the soil smells like minerals and the fermentation smells like food. If you have tested a pH-based soil treatment and tracked the results on camera, leave your data below. Next time we are covering the 3 soil types that predict deer bedding locations on any property without a single boot print in the bedding area. That dead stand is not dead. The dirt underneath it is just asleep. 2 tablespoons of baking soda, a cup of molasses, a quarter cup of salt, and a quart of warm water. Clear the leaves, pour it on the bare soil, walk away. Let the bacteria and the chemistry do the work. Come back in 2 weeks and check the camera. The dirt underneath your dead stand is just asleep. Wake it up.